Hey there, my friend. I'm so happy you dropped by my channel today. If this is your first visit, make sure to subscribe and share this video with your friends and family. It really supports my channel. Let me know in the comments which city or country you're watching from. I read every comment, so let's dive right in. Caleb sensed what awaited him long before he stepped through the door. The long ride on his bike hadn't really been about exercise. It had been a way to collect himself, to keep his emotions from spiraling out of control. With every mile, he quietly coached himself. Hold it together, don't erupt, don't beg, don't fall apart. When he finally slid the key into the lock and entered, he felt the crushing weight of what was about to unfold. The silence inside pressed down on him, thick and suffocating, heavy with all the words left unsaid. At the table, Mara sat still, her eyes fixed somewhere between the gleaming surface and the shadow of her guilt. She avoided his gaze at first, waiting for him to shed his helmet and approach, as though mere closeness might alter what couldn't be changed. When their eyes finally locked, her face showed a fragile mix of remorse and anxious dread. She was bracing herself, ready for the heartbreak she had caused, perhaps even hoping he would erupt so she could feel less like the villain. But Caleb gave her nothing. His look was that of a man emptied, detached, resigned. "Caleb, I need to talk to you," she murmured. He hesitated, then crossed to the fridge, filling a glass with water. Every motion was deliberate, mechanical, as though his body was moving according to some pre-written routine. After drinking, he turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "This is about Trevor, isn't it?" His words froze her in place. Her face lost its color, and her reply stalled somewhere between her lips and her shame. She struggled to compose herself, but his question had stripped away any illusion of control. How did you find out?" "Everyone already knew," Caleb said quietly. "I was just waiting for you to finally admit it." For a moment she said nothing, almost as if searching her mind for the lines she had rehearsed. "I was going to tell you," she whispered. "I just couldn't figure out how." Caleb leaned on the counter, exhausted, drained, but without anger or pity. It was the weary resignation of someone who had been let down by the one person they trusted most. "You expect me to believe that?" he asked. "That after all this time you didn't know how to say it?" She stumbled over weak explanations, but he lifted a hand, cutting her off before the words could form. "Did you think I hadn't noticed how the kids acted around you? Jonah refusing to come to the table, Ella looking for any excuse to stay at a friend's house? They knew. They were just waiting for me to finally see it too." Mara buried her face in trembling hands, speechless, desperate to salvage something. She reached out once more. "Caleb, I know this is awful. I'm not going to defend it or try to explain it away. But I want to fix this. I still believe in what we had." A bitter, humorless laugh escaped him. "You still believe in us, now, after all that's happened?" She rose, attempting to move closer, but he immediately stepped back. "Don't come any closer," he said firmly. "Listen carefully. This ended a long time ago. You were too busy hiding everything, erasing texts, covering your tracks, spinning stories, to notice. I didn't want this to be where we'd end up, but this is where we are. You can't blame this on a rough patch or on life being hard. You had chances, Mara. You had time, you had every opportunity, and you threw it all away." Her figure seemed smaller now, shrinking under the weight of what she had done. But it was far too late. Caleb stepped into the hallway, opened a drawer, and returned holding a slim folder. He placed it gently on the table, nudging it toward her. "The divorce papers are in there. Signed, dated, ready for you." Her eyes fell on the folder as though it were a tangible reminder of her failures, a document recording everything she had destroyed. "You already had this prepared?" she asked quietly. "For weeks," he replied. "Then why wait to give it to me?" "I needed to hear it from you," he said. "I needed to know if there was still enough honesty left in you to confess, even once." His voice was steady throughout, as though every tear he could have shed had already come and gone long before tonight. The grief had already passed, leaving behind only clarity and resolve. Mara collapsed into the chair again, completely drained. She took a deep breath and barely managed to whisper, "I ruined everything, and now I don't even know how to move forward. You'll figure it out, Caleb replied simply. Alone. Without another word, he turned and left the room, leaving her to sit there, consumed by her own remorse. The faint sound of him hanging his bike in the garage was the last thing she heard before tears finally overtook her. Outside, Caleb wiped his face with the towel he'd used on the ride. The tears he had suppressed for weeks mingled with his heavy breaths, a bitter symbol of the loyalty he had given and the betrayal he had received. But even in that ache, he recognized the truth. This was the start of an ending. And sometimes endings are the only way forward. The next morning, Mara went through the motions of her routine, pretending, or hoping, that some fragment of normalcy might still remain. She brewed coffee, set the table as though it were just another quiet Sunday, clinging to the idea that these small rituals might erase what had happened the night before. She wished, perhaps naively, that the simple smell of coffee might bring a kind of peace or redemption. When Caleb walked into the kitchen, she tried to offer a tentative smile, but he didn't smile back. He only glanced briefly in her direction, picked up his usual mug, and leaned against the counter in silence. Realizing her attempt at normalcy was pointless, she spoke softly anyway. I know how badly I've hurt us, but I ended things with Trevor, she said. I was trying to hold on to what we had. I still want to. Caleb remained quiet for a few long moments. He slowly turned the mug in his hands, took a sip, and dropped his gaze for a brief second. Then he lifted his eyes to meet hers, steady and unflinching. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm and deliberate, as if the words had been carefully prepared long before. You didn't bring this to a close, Mara. He did. You just went along because you felt trapped. She opened her mouth ready to argue, but he didn't let her. He ended it because Camille found out. She was the one who put her foot down, who threatened to take the children and forced his hand. He was boxed in by his own deception. And once the facade crumbled, he let you go. That's the real reason it ended, not because you were trying to salvage anything between us. Mara sank into her chair, stunned by the force of his words. Her eyes glistened, though she refused to let the tears spill, whether out of defiance or shame, she couldn't quite tell. Caleb continued, voice even, as he unburdened what he had kept hidden. I know far more than you think. I know about the supposed late nights, the hollow excuses about needing time alone, the afternoons you claimed were just for yourself. I'm aware of all of it, because Camille told me. Her brows drew together, her expression one of disbelief. You speak to Camille? Yes, he confirmed simply. She reached out to me, carefully at first, wondering if I'd noticed anything off between them. She wanted to be certain before doing anything. That's how it started. We began by comparing suspicions, then shared specifics. Eventually we confided in one another, and we became a source of support for each other. It took Mara a few moments to absorb the weight of that admission. The air between them grew dense and heavy. Caleb moved closer, leaning both hands on the table as he fixed his gaze firmly on her. While you were spending time with her husband, I was talking to her. We even ended up seeing the same therapist, sat in joint sessions, joined a cycling group together. She understood my hurt, and I recognized her sorrow too. But here's the difference. We both chose honesty. Mara pressed her fingers together tightly, a knot forming in her chest as she grasped that Camille had stepped into a place of closeness that should have belonged to her. It was a quiet humiliation, but Caleb didn't let up. Do you have any idea how it felt to maintain my composure while you fed me lies straight to my face? I pretended to believe you, just to see how far you would push it. With each flimsy excuse, I observed you more coldly. You acted as though no one would ever catch on. She made a weak attempt at self-defense. It happened when I was feeling vulnerable. I felt unseen, like I didn't matter. But Caleb cut her off, his words sharp. You weren't unseen. You were chasing excitement, with no regard for the destruction you were causing. What you lacked wasn't affection, it was integrity. What you lacked wasn't love, it was accountability. Her voice faltered, the weight of his words filling the space around them. Caleb leaned back against the sink, arms crossed tightly. You had everything here, patience, love, commitment, and you threw it all away for something fleeting and shallow. And now you think you can patch it back together with hollow promises? That's not how this works. She lowered her head, a painful lump rising in her throat, knowing nothing she could say would undo what had been done. Still, she summoned one last desperate question. "And what about you? Are you planning to be with her? With Camille?" Caleb held her gaze for a long, quiet beat before finally answering. "I'm not with anyone. But even if I were, it wouldn't be for the reasons you think. We didn't come together in bed, Mara. We found connection in honesty, in shared pain, in mutual respect, even after everything else fell apart." His words seemed to physically weigh her down. Her posture crumbled, shoulders slumping as if the gravity of his sentences pressed her to the ground. She rose slowly and walked out of the kitchen without saying another word. Caleb stayed behind, staring at his empty coffee cup. There was no relief, no lingering fury, only the quiet certainty that this chapter had closed the very moment she chose to betray him. Everything since had merely been aftermath. In the days that followed, the house felt disjointed, everything in its place, but none of it feeling right. Silence settled over every corner, thick and suffocating, impossible to escape. Mara clung to routine, trying to convince herself that order could restore what had broken. She rose early, made the bed, brewed coffee, but now, these rituals served no one but herself. Caleb barely engaged. His words were clipped, limited to necessity alone. Her very presence felt like an obligation he endured while planning his exit with as little collateral harm as possible. In one last attempt to recover a sense of normalcy, Mara approached him late one afternoon, suggesting they go out for dinner, anywhere but inside this heavy, memory-laden house. Caleb didn't even pause in his work. He glanced up briefly and replied flatly that he wasn't interested in performing the charade in public. His rejection hit her squarely. There was no space left even for pretense. It was absolute. That evening, she sat alone at the corner of the dining table, pushing food around her plate without eating. Later, Caleb came downstairs briefly, grabbed a quick bite, and disappeared back upstairs, without a word. She lingered in that room, her eyes tracing the empty chairs, the silence heavy with echoes, laughter, old stories, conversations that once animated the space. Now, even the children stayed away. Just days before, Ella had called her, the distance in her tone unmistakable as she explained that she needed time apart, that the betrayal had hurt her more profoundly than she had anticipated. Jonah had offered no comfort either. His words were sharp, almost dismissive. "I can't talk to you right now, Mom. Maybe some other time." In that instant, Mara felt the full impact. The wreckage from her failed marriage had spread far wider than her and Caleb. It had fractured the family itself. The next morning, while tidying Jonah's room, her attention was caught by a folded letter on his desk. She settled gently onto his bed and unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. He used to leave her notes like this as a boy, cheerful scribbles before school. But this message bore none of that warmth. In it, Jonah laid bare his disappointment, admitting he felt ashamed. He had never thought his mother could act in such a petty way. He wrote of the anguish of watching his father carry the weight of holding the family together as it fell apart, and how he needed to pull back to avoid treating her like someone he no longer recognized. When she reached the end, sorrow consumed her completely. She cried with the realization that her losses went far deeper than she had acknowledged. It wasn't just Caleb who had withdrawn. The children had as well. The family she cherished had unraveled entirely. She tried calling Ella, but it went straight to voicemail. Her text to Jonah received no reply. She recorded a video message, hoping to explain herself, but hesitated and deleted it. Words seemed meaningless now. After years of conversation, nothing she said seemed to matter anymore. Instead, she turned to quiet gestures, cooking their favorite meals, writing gentle messages on the bathroom mirror, planning a special Sunday lunch. But neither child showed up. No reply, no response. That Sunday afternoon, as Caleb stood near the sink, he finally spoke. He faced her directly, his voice steady but resolute. "You need to stop pretending this can be fixed. What we had, it's already gone. The kids are just doing what they can to survive this. So am I." She gave a faint nod, too exhausted to offer a rebuttal. Caleb took his car keys and walked out. He stayed away for hours. Her thoughts churned endlessly. She told herself he wasn't with Camille, but doubt gnawed at her. In truth, the most painful thought wasn't whether he was with another woman. It was that anywhere else seemed preferable to being here with her. Late that night, a noise from the kitchen stirred her awake. She crept downstairs and found Caleb there, a small suitcase beside him, carefully packing utensils into a box. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Are you leaving?" He didn't respond immediately. He calmly shut the drawer, arranged the items inside, then turned slightly without meeting her gaze. "Just getting things sorted. Once the paperwork is finalized, I want to leave quickly," he said quietly. She leaned against the counter, feeling as though the very walls of the house were falling apart around her. She took a cautious step toward him, reaching out, but he instinctively recoiled. Then he looked directly at her and spoke with a chilling finality. "I know what regret feels like, but it doesn't erase what happened. I'm no longer the man who waited for you to come home, who planned little surprises, who believed every excuse. That part of me is gone. All that's left now is fatigue." Her breath caught and she took a step back, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've ruined myself." Without another word, he picked up the suitcase and disappeared into the bedroom. She remained standing, the house around her transformed into a museum of failures. The framed photos, the shared possessions, all of it now felt like evidence of what had crumbled. At first light, she quietly packed a small suitcase, a few changes of clothes, important documents, a book, and a photo of the family. She moved slowly through the house, pausing in the living room, in the children's rooms, and in the bathroom where she used to leave playful notes for Caleb. She wiped her eyes on her sleeve, steadied her breathing, and moved toward the door. At the top of the stairs, Caleb appeared, watching her silently. She didn't beg. She met his gaze directly and said simply, "Please look after the kids." His answer was swift and cutting. They already know who's been looking after them. Without another word, she stepped out, suitcase in hand, her path unclear but her burden immense, the weight of her decisions following her. Caleb remained where he stood for several moments, unmoving, before slowly turning back into the house and locking the door behind him. The divorce process moved forward with the precision of a man who had already mapped out every detail. Caleb left no room for hesitation. He filed promptly, answered emails quickly, and coordinated meetings with his lawyer without delay. For weeks, he conducted himself with the cold focus of a surgeon preparing for a final, irreversible cut. On the day he was to sign the final documents, he sat motionless for a long while, holding the papers in his hands, before finally exhaling, as though only now surfacing after being submerged for far too long. Mara had tried repeatedly to re-establish contact, sending message after message, some filled with apologies, others steeped in nostalgic recollections, as if memories alone could repair what she had shattered. Caleb read each one, though he never replied. His curiosity kept him reading, observing how far she might go. Yet even in her sorrow, he sensed a thread of selfishness, a need to ease her own conscience rather than truly repair what had been lost. It was a still Wednesday afternoon when Caleb finally chose to gather up the remnants of their shared history. He carefully sifted through old photographs of the kids, separating albums, documents, school artwork, every trace of the family they had created. Though that family was no longer whole, its legacy remained part of him. Slowly, deliberately, he packed everything into boxes, making sure each piece of the past was preserved, then sealed the boxes tight. Only after this did he allow himself to face what lay ahead, starting anew. At the same time, Camille was undertaking her own quiet reconstruction. She had left the house she had once shared with Trevor, renting a small apartment where she could begin fresh with her children. Refusing to let betrayal define her, she focused inward, determined to rebuild without noise or haste. As Camille and Caleb spoke more often, something gentle emerged. A fragile but genuine connection formed through their shared wounds. There was no rush to fill the spaces left behind, no frantic need to escape loneliness. Their meetings were simple: coffee shared without expectation, walks taken in companionable silence. During one of those walks, as though voicing a forgotten wish, Camille mentioned that she had always dreamed of seeing Maine. She admitted she'd never visited its rugged shores, though she had saved folders of photos and itineraries on her computer. Caleb listened attentively but said nothing then. In the weeks that followed, he quietly made plans. Then, one day, he appeared at her door with 2 plane tickets, a short journey, a chance for both to breathe beyond the shadows of old heartbreaks. On that trip, they rediscovered how to laugh, deep, unguarded laughter. They wandered quiet paths, enjoyed meals in tucked-away restaurants, and took photos freely, unbothered by who might notice. There was no guilt in this companionship, no rush, just a much-needed pause for 2 people who had carried far too much for far too long. One evening, as they watched the ocean surge and retreat, Camille spoke softly. "I never thought I'd feel safe again." Caleb replied after a moment, "I used to think safety meant predictability. But now I realize it's about being with someone who treats you with care, even when no words are spoken." When they returned home, both felt lighter. Their conversations became more natural, their time together increasingly seamless. One afternoon, Ella stopped by Caleb's house and found Camille in the kitchen preparing a snack. Without hesitation, Ella joined her, smiling easily as they chopped vegetables and chatted as if they had always known each other. Camille had been careful, never imposing herself on Caleb's children, allowing them to decide what space she might occupy. But closeness came organically. Jonah, who was slower to open up, eventually did too. When it was time for him to prepare for college, it was Camille who stayed up late helping him pack. There was no need to formally declare a relationship. Their actions spoke clearly enough. One evening, after a quiet meal, Jonah turned to his father and said, "You seem calmer, happier. That's what matters to us." Caleb smiled, placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder, and answered, "That's all I want to keep being." Meanwhile, across town, Mara watched from afar. She would scroll through her children's social media, seeing photos from gatherings where her absence was both clear and unspoken. She noticed the brightness in Ella's eyes, the steadiness in Jonah's demeanor. The messages they sent her were infrequent and brief. "Everything's fine. My test went okay. Spent time with Dad today." It felt as though her family had learned to live without her entirely. One afternoon, she called. When Caleb saw her name appear on his phone, he hesitated, then answered, ready to close that chapter. Her voice was frail as she asked, "Do you hate me?" He exhaled quietly before replying, "No." "And I think that's what unsettles you the most. If I hated you, I'd still be stuck in what happened. But I'm not. I've moved forward, and you're still standing where we left things." There was a long silence on her end. Before she could speak again, he gently added, "Take care," and ended the call. That evening, he and Camille made dinner together, laughing when the recipe went slightly wrong, listening to music on his phone, and later sitting quietly on the porch. Life was moving on. The pain was easing. And finally, love, real love, built on honesty, mutual respect, and quiet understanding, felt right. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.